So it'll be a recording of this class. And so I want you to not have to click on something you don't want to see. So just check it off. If you see virtual class and you don't want to, and you were at class, you don't want to watch it again, just check it off. And then this is like your Monday work, right? You'll see a lecture. It'll say part 1, part 2, part 3. That's everything that I want you to complete before the Wednesday class. So let's, so yeah, that's how the new material looks. So this is your actual Moodle play. So this was last week's virtual class. We did, this was our PowerPoint. This was the class. I only recorded or posted 9 minutes of it because a lot of it was stuff that I didn't need to post. And then this was a new thing. That's where I had left off. So it doesn't say virtual class. That's a new link. You need to click here after you watch it to make sure that you are caught up with your content. Okay. So you really want to use these green buttons to make sure that you're viewing everything that you need to view. Again, you don't ever have to view virtual class twice. You may need to go under a virtual class to view something. Any questions? No? Okay, so this is all the stuff that was due for Monday. I posted chapter 4, before Monday's lecture time, and then all of this was done. So you want to view these before Wednesday's class, and then check them off again as you go so that you know you're caught up. So now we are moving forward. I updated this just so you know where we are. We are on chapter 4-5. So we are going to start chapter 5 today, but we're finishing up chapter 4. Okay, and we did get into chapter 4 back here. But next week will be all chapter 5 before we move into the skeletal system, and then we'll take our exam will be the week of the 13th. So nothing's changed as far as the exam days. I'm just showing you where we are here with chapter 4 and chapter 5. Okay, so this is actually the end. So before I start lecturing, is there any questions for logistics now at this point?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question. There is a quiz on epithelial tissues that says that it doesn't count towards our grade.
Yep.
Due on the 23rd. Is that just a practice quiz for us?
If it doesn't count towards your grade, it's a practice quiz. I still expect everybody to do it, but it won't count towards your grade. And then the next quiz, everybody should do it. And if they don't, then you're going to start getting zeros put into the grade book.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question. So has any quiz counted so far?
No. Nope.
Okay.
The one that's due the 23rd still won't count. It's still a practice for you to get used to the Moodle format. And then the next one, it's also about practicing getting them done on time, right? Because sometimes you think, oh, it's due on the 23rd. I'll do it at 8 p.m. And then you open it up at 8 p.m. and it was due at 5. So you always I'm making the quizzes due at 5 p.m. the day of, because that's like before our class time. So you're done with your quiz before our class times are starting. That's the format I'm following. But sometimes I enter it wrong. You just want to click on it and make sure you get it done by the deadline. Whatever's posted, once you click on the exam, you want to follow that and not miss it. And you can do it, days ahead of time. And they're low stakes. They're not, they're doable. They're doable. And they're review. So you have to have covered the content to do it easily. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to play catch up while you're taking the quiz. Good. Any other questions? Not at this time. All right. So if something comes up, let me know. So we're going to start now with it's kind of the end of chapter 4, but I like to talk about it before we talk about the integument. Okay. So this is the integument, and we're going to look at it in detail all in its cellular structure. But but when there's an onsult, when you have an ablation or something happening, there's a whole process for repair of the tissue. So let's just look at that first, and then look at specifically the integument and how it unravels, or what are all the key components of it. So there's a release of the inflammatory chemicals, which are illustrated here, right? And the inflammatory chemicals are what's going to trigger the leaky blood vessels, which is why we get a bit of swelling and, of course, and blood moving. But the chemicals are starting the initiation of that, okay? and it's going to trigger blood clotting to occur. So that all starts at the beginning as soon as the onsult happens. So the different types of cells, mast cells and other cells, are the ones that are responsible for releasing those inflammatory chemicals. And just as I said before, the blood vessels get leaky. There's white blood cells, clotting proteins. Those are the specific ones that are going to cause the proteins to start their processing, and then and they're all going to go to that injured area. So if you recall that there was a kind of like a dormant fiber in the red blood cell from the epithelial and connect the tissue section from last chapter, right? It's the clotting protein that's going to trigger fibers to start to thicken in the blood and cause the clotting. The clotting will seal off the injury, right? And that's like a natural Band-Aid that protects it. Eventually it looks like a scab because when it's exposed to air, it dries up and it becomes that scab. All right, so everything has to happen in an organized way, and you have to have blood supply to initiate these processes. There's something called granulation tissue, which is simply, it's a blood-rich tissue. It's very thin. It is called granulation because it has a granular, like more on a microscopic level, but if you imagine how sugar is granular, right, it has that kind of consistency. Fibroblasts are there, and that their collagen fibers are going to be the construction that's going to help to bridge the gap where everything needs to come together. And of course, you have your macrophages to take away whatever's left over from the construction. So dead cells, anything byproduct or whatever will get taken out in stage 2. So this is still stage 2 here, and it's just illustrating that the blood clot is starting to be replaced with the granulation tissue. And here's an illustration of the macrophages eating up things and taking them away. And the scab here will detach off of the surface. So right here, if you can, I'm like checking. You can see, I'm getting like little notifications. You can see my, yeah, you can see my slides. All right, I'm getting like little pop-ups that are like giving me
Yeah, you froze for a sec.
Okay, all right. I was like, uh-oh. Oh boy, hope we don't, I think we'll be good. All right, I'm back, hopefully. So, so what I was talking about was this crisscrossing, this fibrous network that they're coming and approximating where that injury is, right? These two sides have to grow back together, right? And it's this process here of those cells. They're kind of like creeping and crawling along, creating a scaffold that all the other tissue can then creep and crawl along and grow back into its normal place. So stage 3, the scab gets removed, the fibrous tissue gets thicker, it matures, it gets stronger, and then it looks like the tissue that was around it previously. So if you can also picture when an injury is starting to heal, that it has like a pinkish appearance or like a thin skin appearance, if you will, for lack of a better term. It's later in stage 3 that it starts to look like itself again. There's scar tissue that is in the underlying part down here. So it's not the same, it's not exactly the same tissue, it's regenerative, but there was damage and this tissue becomes weaker. So whenever you get a serious injury and then you have the scar tissue, whether it's building up and actually a physical scar that you can look at, even if it looks thicker than skin, it's actually weaker than skin. So scar tissue is weak. Cool. And so, yeah, so here we just see it all coming together, and then it's going to start to look more like the sides of how it was.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what do the fibroblasts do again?
So they're the type of cell that releases the collagen fiber, for example. Or it can be any type of fiber, but in this case, we were talking about collagen. So that cell is like, it has the DNA makeup to excrete the collagen a fiber cell. It's like the mama of it. Okay, cool. So yeah, so scar tissue underlying not as strong as the normal tissue. So here's a highlighted slide. So if you make a note, like whatever number slide this is, or you want to just tissues that regenerate extremely well, right? You can make a little note. There'll be an exam question that somehow maybe relates to this material. So I'm just trying to make it easier for you. So I highlight it. Okay. So we talked about this previously, all right? That there's different, the qualities of the tissue matters and the regenerative capacity matters. And this is a list of the ones that do very well. Here's a list of a moderate capacity, right? And my question is why? Why are they different? Cardiac, muscle, and nervous tissue, specifically of the brain and spinal cord, right? There's scarring. I talked about it in the previous lecture from Monday. And again, these tissues virtually have no functional regenerative processes. So there's a note here that there's new research showing some cell division for cardiac and nervous tissue more in the periphery again, but for cardiac muscle. But it's new, we're not quite sure, and we're not working with it quite yet, but people are trying to figure it out. It hasn't hit the hard copy books yet, but this is kind of the latest research. So, so this concept now is regenerated in capacities. Here's my questions for you. Virtually no capacity. Here's my questions for you. So we're going to get into groups. Hopefully, someone in your group already watched the video from Monday and can be of great assistance. If you participated in the previous lecture virtual class, I think you'll be able to get through this pretty well. But this is the assignment. So you're going to get together, talk about, introduce yourself, say hey, talk about these things, see if you can identify some stuff and answer all of this. Okay. You can start with whatever one you want and see where your 10 minutes take you. I think some of you will be able to complete it. And if you get half done, that's great. So let's see what we can do. I'm going to split you guys up into groups.